I never thought my life would split cleanly into a before and an after inside a hospital hallway. Boston in winter has a way of sharpening everything. Air so cold it burns your lungs, sidewalks glazed with salt and half-melted snow, people walking faster as if speed alone can protect them. I was 28, newly freelancing, and desperate for stability. That was how I ended up at the Massachusetts Biomedical Research Center on a grey January morning, clutching a manila folder labeled Clinical Trial Participant, Phase 2. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself it was safe. I told myself I had read everything. The building smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee. A television in the waiting area murmured about a snowstorm moving up the coast. I checked in with a receptionist who smiled too professionally and handed me a clipboard. "Just confirm your consent forms," she said, tapping the stack. "Standard procedure." I remember thinking how comforting those words sounded. Standard. Procedure. Like nothing bad could happen if it was routine. The trial was for an autoimmune medication. Nothing experimental, nothing extreme. At least that's how it had been presented. Minimal side effects. Full transparency. My name, Callista Verne, signed in blue ink at the bottom of every page. I was careful. I always was. Or so I believed. The first weeks passed quietly. Blood draws, questionnaires, check-ins with a research coordinator named Evan, who wore soft sweaters and spoke gently, like he didn't want to startle anyone. "You're doing great," he told me once, smiling as he reviewed my chart. Textbook response. I let myself feel proud of that. Useful. Like my body was cooperating with science instead of fighting it for once. Then came the migraines. They started as dull pressure behind my eyes, the kind you could ignore with coffee and stubbornness. By week 6, they were splitting, white hot. I'd wake up nauseous, my vision swimming, hands trembling as I tried to type. When I mentioned it during my check-in, Evan frowned sympathetically. "That's not listed as a primary side effect," he said, "but stress can amplify things." Stress, that word again. Always so convenient. I believed him because I wanted to. It wasn't until the follow-up appointment in early March, the day everything cracked, that I saw the email. I had arrived early, snow still clinging to the cuffs of my boots. The waiting room was emptier than usual. I sat down, pulled out my phone, and opened my inbox to distract myself. That's when I noticed it, a forwarded message, buried in a long thread of automated reminders. The subject line read, "Ray, updated consent language, internal only, internal." My name wasn't in the recipient list, but the attachment was there, staring back at me. I don't know why I opened it. Instinct, maybe. Or the quiet voice in my head that had started asking questions weeks ago. The document loaded slowly. At first it looked familiar. Same header, same formatting as the consent form I'd signed. Then I started reading the highlighted changes. Expanded neurological risk, unreported migraine frequency, reclassification of non-serious adverse events. My stomach dropped. I scrolled faster, my pulse roaring in my ears. Page after page of revised language. Language I had never seen. Language that shifted responsibility away from the company and onto the participants. Onto me. My hands went cold. I checked the date in the footer. The update had been finalized 2 weeks after I enrolled. I stared at my signature on the original form, remembered how carefully I'd read it, how reassured I'd felt. They had changed the rules after I agreed to play. Callista? I looked up. Evan stood in the doorway, holding my chart. His smile faltered when he saw my face. "Is everything okay?" he asked. I stood up slowly, the document still glowing on my phone. "Did the consent terms change after I signed them?" I asked. The room seemed to hold its breath. Evan's eyes flicked to my screen. Just for a second. But it was enough. I'm not sure what you're referring to," he said carefully. That was when I knew. Not suspected, not feared. Knew. "You told me migraines weren't a known side effect," I said. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. This document says otherwise. Evan swallowed. Let's step into an office. No, I said. My hands were shaking now. I want an answer. A woman across the room looked up from her magazine. The receptionist stopped typing. Evan lowered his voice. Some language evolves as data comes in. It doesn't necessarily. Did you update the consent without notifying participants? I pressed. Silence. That silence felt heavier than any confession. I felt exposed, used, like my body had been rented without my permission. I trusted you, I said. The words cracked on the way out. Evan didn't meet my eyes. We follow regulatory guidance, he said softly. You're safe. Safe. I laughed. A short, broken sound that surprised even me. I walked out before he could say anything else. Out into the cold, into the noise of the city, my head pounding harder than ever. On the subway ride home, the truth settled in layers. This wasn't a mistake. It was strategy, legal insulation. They had bet on silence. By the time I reached my apartment, my fear had turned sharp, almost electric. I opened my laptop. I reread the document. I compared timestamps. I started taking screenshots. And then, as I dug deeper into the email thread, I saw something that made my breath catch. A list. Participant IDs, notes. A column labeled Expected Pushback, Low. My ID was on it. I stared at the screen, realization burning through me. They hadn't just changed the rules. They had calculated who wouldn't fight back. And they were wrong about me. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the spreadsheet. Expected pushback. Low. It wasn't just what they'd done. It was how calmly they'd predicted my silence. By dawn, Boston was wrapped in fresh snow. The city looked clean, almost innocent, like it hadn't just watched me lose my faith in institutions I'd trusted my entire adult life. I brewed coffee I didn't drink and opened my laptop again. I started where fear usually tells you not to, by reading everything. Clinical trial forums, patient advocacy boards, Reddit threads buried 3 pages deep. At first, it was just fragments. People describing unusual headaches, vision issues brushed off as anxiety, participants quietly removed from trials for being non-compliant. Then the names started repeating. Different cities, same phrasing, consent updated mid-trial, symptoms minimized. Legal language changed after enrollment. My chest tightened. This wasn't isolated, it was a system. I made a spreadsheet of my own. Participant aliases, dates, trial phases, pharma sponsors. I worked until my fingers ached and my coffee went cold. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I stared at it for a full 5 seconds before answering. Hello? Callista Verne, a woman asked. Her voice was cautious but steady. Yes, this is Mara Klein. I was in the same trial. I think you got the email too. My heart skipped. You saw the update? There was a pause. Then a breath. I wasn't supposed to, but it was forwarded to me by mistake. I've been sick for weeks, and when I asked questions, they said it was unrelated. I sat down hard on the couch. You're not imagining it, I said. They changed the consent. Mara exhaled shakily. I thought I was crazy. No, I said, you're not. That word, not, felt like a hand reaching through the dark. We talked for an hour, compared notes, symptoms, excuses we'd been fed. When we hung up, she asked one last question. What are you going to do? I looked at my screen, at the growing list of names. I don't know yet, I said. But I'm not letting this disappear. By evening, there were 3 of us in a group chat. By the next morning, 7. Different ages, different backgrounds, same story. One woman, Renata, had been dropped from the trial after reporting neurological tremors. Another, June, had signed arbitration paperwork she didn't understand because English wasn't her first language. Every message sharpened my resolve. Fear still sat in my chest, but now it had competition. Anger. I requested my full participant file through the hospital's records portal. When it arrived, it was incomplete. Missing attachments. Redacted sections labeled proprietary. I laughed when I saw that. Of course. I cross-referenced the metadata from the consent update with the email headers. Time-stamped edits. Internal review chains. Names of compliance officers who never spoke to participants. This wasn't sloppy. It was deliberate. Late one night, as snow tapped against my window, a new message appeared in the group chat. Renata. I found something. She uploaded a screenshot. An internal memo. Subject line. Risk containment strategy. Participant communication. My throat went dry as I read. If consent language is updated post-enrollment, notification is not required unless adverse events exceed threshold. Prioritize participants assessed as low risk for legal escalation. Low risk. That was the phrase they used instead of human. I felt something shift inside me. Not break, but harden. This is proof, Mara typed. Isn't it? It's a start, I replied. But it's not enough. Silence followed. Heavy, expectant. I knew what they were all thinking. Going public meant consequences. I pictured my name dragged through legal filings. The word disgruntled attached to my story. My career, already fragile, caught in the crossfire. I closed my laptop and leaned my head back against the wall. Do not be difficult, a voice from my past whispered. Do not make trouble. I opened my eyes. They're counting on us to stay small, I typed. That's the whole strategy. A typing bubble appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. June. If we don't speak, they'll do it again. To someone else. That settled it. The next step wasn't rage. It was precision. I reached out to a journalist I'd met years earlier at a freelance networking event. Elliot Sharp, investigative reporter, healthcare beat, known for patience and receipts. I didn't send everything. Just enough. Hi, Elliot. I think I have documents showing a pharmaceutical company altering consent terms mid-trial without participant notification. Are you interested in taking a look? I hovered over the send button, heart pounding. Then I clicked. 2 hours later, my phone rang. This is Elliot, a familiar voice said. Where did you get these? I stared at the snow-covered city outside my window. I lived them, I said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, if this is real, it's big. It's real, I said, and it's bigger than me. Can you protect your sources? He asked. I glanced at the group chat, at the women who had trusted me with their stories. Yes, I said, but we'll need to be careful. We always are, he replied. Meet me tomorrow. After the call ended, my hands started shaking, not with fear this time, but adrenaline. I typed one last message to the group. I'm talking to a reporter. Nothing moves without your consent. We do this together, or not at all. Responses flooded in. Yes, I'm in. Finally, I closed my laptop and stood by the window, watching headlights smear across wet pavement. Somewhere in Boston, the people who had marked me low risk were sleeping peacefully. They had no idea what was coming. The cafe Elliot chose was small, narrow, and loud in a way that felt intentional. Steam hissed from the espresso machine. Dishes clinked. Conversations overlapped. Privacy disguised as chaos. Elliot Sharp looked exactly the same as he had years ago. Creased jacket, tired eyes, notebook already open like he'd been writing before I arrived. Thanks for coming, he said, not looking up yet. Before we start, are you safe? The question landed heavier than I expected. I think so, I said. But I didn't think I wasn't safe before either. That earned a brief, humorless smile. Tell me everything, he said, from the beginning. Assume I know nothing. So I did. I told him about the waiting room, the migraines, the email, the spreadsheet that decided my courage for me. I slid my phone across the table with screenshots queued up, timestamps circled, names highlighted. Elliot didn't interrupt. He just listened, pen moving steadily. This memo, he said finally, tapping Renata's screenshot, is the spine of this story. It proves intent, I said. They knew. They planned for silence. And they categorized participants by likelihood of resistance, he added. That's not just unethical. That's combustible. I exhaled slowly. What happens next? He leaned back. Next, I verify everything, independently. That takes time. How much time? Enough for them to notice, he said gently. As if summoned by the words, my phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. Elliot's eyes flicked to it. That was fast. I hesitated, then answered. Callista Verne, a man said. Polite. Polished. This is Daniel Roth from Helixora Pharmaceuticals' legal department. My stomach dropped. Yes, I said carefully. We've been informed you may have accessed internal documents not intended for participants. He continued. We'd like to discuss how that occurred. Elliot watched my face change. I didn't hack anything, I said. I received an email. A confidential email. Roth corrected. Regardless, dissemination of proprietary material could expose you to legal action. There it was. The warning wrapped in courtesy. I'm a patient, I said. Not your employee. Of course, he replied smoothly. Which is why we hope to resolve this quietly. Quietly. I looked at Elliot. He gave a subtle nod. No, I said. My voice surprised me with its steadiness. I don't think quiet is appropriate. A pause, thicker than before. Then I strongly advise you to consult counsel, Roth said. We'll be in touch. The line went dead. For a moment, the cafe noise rushed back in around me. They're scared, Elliot said calmly. Are they? I asked. My hands were shaking now. Yes, he said. But scared institutions don't apologize. They escalate. The group chat exploded the moment I stepped outside. Mara. They called me too. Renata. Same. Legal threats. June. I'm terrified. I typed with cold fingers. They're trying to isolate us, I wrote. Don't respond without legal advice. Elliot connected us with a non-profit legal advocacy group by the end of the day. Pro bono. Experienced in medical ethics cases. The intake attorney, Lila Chen, listened carefully as I explained. This is retaliation, she said plainly. And it strengthens your case. Even if they bury us in paperwork? I asked. Especially then, she replied. Still, fear seeped in. That night, I lay awake imagining worst-case scenarios. Lawsuits, blacklists. My name turning into a cautionary tale whispered in hiring meetings. She's difficult. She causes problems. The old conditioning clawed at me. But then I remembered the list. Expected pushback. Low. They had underestimated the cost of underestimating us. Over the next week, Elliot worked quietly. Too quietly. He asked for corroboration, trial protocols, emails from compliance, logs of adverse event reporting. Every time he requested something new, my chest tightened. What if it wasn't enough? Then, on a Tuesday morning, he called. I have confirmation, he said. I gripped the phone. Of what? 3 former Helixora employees, he said. Anonymous, but credible. All say consent language was intentionally delayed to avoid participant withdrawals. My knees went weak. I sat down on the floor. They knew, I whispered. Yes, he said, and they documented it. The article took shape fast after that. Headlines drafted. Quotes anonymized. Legal reviewed every word. Elliot sent me a near-final version with tracked changes and a warning at the top. Once published, there's no putting this back. I read it slowly. Every sentence felt like standing in bright light after months underground. This is going to hurt them, Mara texted. And us, Renata replied. But it's the truth. The night before publication, my phone rang again. Same number. Daniel Roth. This is your final opportunity, he said. If you cooperate, Helixora is prepared to offer compensation. My heart pounded. Compensation for what? For misunderstandings, he said. And your silence. I closed my eyes. Money, safety, oblivion. I thought of June signing papers she couldn't read. Of Renata shaking as she typed. Of my migraines dismissed as stress. No, I said. This decision will have consequences, he warned. So did yours, I replied, and hung up. At 6 a.m., Elliot texted one word: published. I opened the link with shaking hands. There it was. The truth. Public. And beneath it, a notification alert began to multiply. Emails, missed calls, unknown numbers. The silence they'd engineered was gone, and the noise had just begun. The morning after publication didn't feel real. Boston woke up the same way it always did. Buses hissing, boots crunching through slush, coffee lines stretching out the door. But I felt like I was walking through a version of the city that no longer belonged to me. My phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Emails from strangers, voicemails from blocked numbers, interview requests marked urgent. I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, hands wrapped around a mug I'd reheated 3 times and still hadn't tasted. The headlines stared back at me from every screen. Pharmaceutical, giant altered consent terms. Mid-trial, documents show. My name sat beneath it. Not hidden, not anonymized. Elliot had warned me. Once your name is out there, it's out there. I hadn't understood how heavy that would feel until now. By noon, Helixora released a statement. We take participant safety seriously. All procedures followed regulatory guidance. Allegations are misleading. Misleading. I laughed, sharp and humorless. The group chat pulsed with messages. Mara. My mom saw it. She's scared for me. Renata. They're calling us liars on TV. June. I don't regret it, but I'm shaking. I typed back slowly, choosing every word. We told the truth. That matters. Even when they're louder. Because they were louder. Cable news segments, industry spokespeople, doctors who'd never met us explaining why we were misinformed participants. I learned a new phrase that day: reputational containment. It meant turning us into unreliable narrators of our own bodies. By evening, the emails shifted tone, legal notices, cease and desist language, a reminder of arbitration clauses buried deep in the original paperwork. I forwarded everything to Lila. She replied within minutes. This is intimidation, she wrote. Document everything. Do not engage directly. But intimidation works because it feels personal. That night, someone left a voicemail without speaking, just breathing, 30 seconds of it. I sat on my bed afterward, heart racing, trying to convince myself it was nothing. I failed. The next day, Elliot called. There's pressure from advertisers, he said. Helixora is leaning hard. Are they trying to kill the story? I asked. They can't unpublish it, he said, but they can distract. As if on cue, a second headline started trending. Former trial participant has history of migraines. Sources say. I stared at the screen. History. I had mentioned occasional headaches on a medical form years ago. They were reframing it as pre-existing, discrediting my experience. They're rewriting me, I said quietly. Yes, Elliot replied. And they're testing whether you'll retreat. I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked, what do we do? We widen the lens, he said. This can't just be about you anymore. The answer terrified me. Going wider meant exposure for everyone. That evening, we held a video call, faces flickering into view, each woman framed by her own small square of fear and resolve. Mara looked exhausted. June clutched a mug with both hands. Renata sat rigid, jaw set. They're trying to turn Callista into the problem, Renata said. If she falls, we all do. I swallowed. I didn't ask for this, I said. I know, Mara replied gently. But you're here now. Silence settled between us. Then June spoke. In my culture, we're taught not to challenge doctors, she said softly. But I don't want my silence to protect them. Something loosened in my chest. We don't all have to go public, I said. No one owes that. But some of us might, Renata said. On our own terms. That was the shift. Not reaction, but strategy. Over the next days, Elliot coordinated follow-up interviews, anonymous testimonies, audio clips, internal charts stripped of identifying details but rich with pattern. The story grew teeth. And Helixera noticed. They requested a formal response interview. Elliot called me immediately. They want you present. My stomach dropped. Live? No, he said. Recorded, but still risky. I paced my apartment, every instinct screaming, don't. They'll try to trap me, I said. They'll try, Elliot agreed. But you don't have to go alone. Lila prepped me for hours. What to say, what not to say, how to pause, how silence can be power. The interview room was sterile. White walls, 2 cameras. A Helixora representative named Dr. Samuel Crane sat across from me, hands folded, expression calm. Callista, he began. We empathize with your distress. I felt the word like a needle. You changed consent terms after enrollment, I said evenly, without notifying participants. We updated language to reflect emerging data, he replied. Participant safety remained paramount. Then why classify participants by likelihood of legal pushback? I asked. A flicker. Gone in a second. That document has been taken out of context, he said. Context doesn't change intent, I replied. His jaw tightened. Afterward, I locked myself in a bathroom stall and shook until my knees gave out. But when the segment aired, something unexpected happened. People believed me. Comments poured in. Messages from nurses. Former trial participants from other studies. Doctors quietly admitting they'd seen similar practices. The narrative cracked. 3 days later, Elliot called with urgency in his voice. Callista, he said. A federal oversight committee just announced a preliminary review. My breath caught. Of Helixora? Yes, he said. And not just this trial. For the first time since January, I felt something close to relief. But it didn't last. That night, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. No logo, no signature. Just one line. If you testify, we will make sure you never work in this field again. I stared at the screen, pulse hammering. The fight was no longer theoretical. They weren't just defending themselves. They were coming for me.